He did not hide in basements. He did not live in the shadows. He woke up like everyone else, went to work, followed routines, lived in plain sight. For years, Max Butler believed the internet was more than a tool. It was protection. Behind usernames and screens, distance and delay, he believed the world could not reach him. That consequences belonged to other people, other mistakes, other lives. No matter how large the damage became, no matter how many people were affected on the other side of the screen, he repeated the same quiet sentence to himself. They cannot see me. This belief did not arrive all at once. It formed slowly, through repetition, through silence. Nothing happened. Then nothing happened again. And when nothing happens long enough, the human mind adapts. Risk stops feeling real. Responsibility becomes abstract. Harm turns invisible. Max Butler was not reckless. He was comfortable. Comfort is more dangerous than fear. Fear keeps people alert. Comfort tells them they are safe. To him, anonymity was not a risk to manage. It was a condition he lived in. But anonymity does not erase identity. It only postpones it. And postponement creates habits. Habits shape behavior. Behavior forms patterns. And patterns are never invisible. They are human. For a long time, Butler believed the internet made him untouchable. That technology had lifted him above consequence, above accountability, above reach. But the internet did not betray him. It never had to. Because in the end, it is never the system that collapses first. It is the belief. The belief that someone can stay the same while the world around them changes. The belief that being unseen means being unreachable. That belief is where this story begins. Before the name Iceman appeared in investigations, before online forums whispered about influence and control, Max Butler was not a legend. He was ordinary. He did not look threatening. He did not behave unpredictably. He did not seek attention. People around him did not describe a criminal mastermind. They described someone calm, focused, quietly confident. Confidence can be persuasive. It reassures others, but more importantly, it reassures the person who carries it. Butler was not impulsive. He did not rush decisions. He watched. He watched others take risks too quickly, watched arrests unfold, watched mistakes repeat themselves again and again. And each time someone else fell, something inside him hardened. I am not like them. That sentence was never spoken aloud. It lived silently inside his choices. He believed intelligence meant distance. That if he stayed detached enough, careful enough, disciplined enough, he would never be pulled into the consequences he saw destroy others. This was not arrogance in the dramatic sense. It was familiarity. When a person spends enough time around danger without being harmed, the mind begins to rewrite the threat. Fear fades. Caution softens. Confidence replaces doubt. Butler did not see himself as a criminal. He saw himself as someone who understood the system better than those around him. That belief shaped his identity. He was not chasing chaos. He valued structure, order, predictability, and those qualities allowed him to feel responsible rather than guilty. He did not see victims. He saw distance. Screens create that distance. They flatten emotion. They remove faces. They turn consequences into abstractions. Over time, that separation becomes familiar, and familiarity turns into comfort. Comfort convinces people they are in control. Butler did not believe he was special. He believed he was careful. But careful people can still be wrong, and confident people often stop questioning themselves. This is where the myth begins to form. Not from brilliance, not from genius, but from repetition without consequence, from routines that never seem to fail, from risks that never appear to land, from the quiet belief that if nothing has gone wrong yet, nothing ever will. And that belief does not feel reckless. It feels logical, measured, reasonable. That is what makes it dangerous. And that is how an ordinary man begins to disappear, while a myth slowly takes his place. Anonymity does not feel like hiding. It feels like relief. When no one looks back at you, when no voice answers immediately, the human mind loosens its grip. Silence begins to feel like permission. Online, actions rarely meet consequences in real time. There is no face reacting, no eyes narrowing, no voice asking why, no moment of discomfort. That delay matters, because the human brain is shaped by feedback, by response, by friction. When those things disappear, behavior changes. Psychologists call it distance, moral distance, emotional distance. But from the inside, it feels simpler. It feels safe. For Max Butler, anonymity was not a tactic. It was an environment, a place where responsibility did not vanish suddenly, but dissolved slowly, without effort, without intention. Each action felt separate from the next, disconnected, weightless. And when actions feel weightless, they begin to feel harmless. This is how the illusion forms, not through denial, not through defiance, but through repetition without response. You act, nothing happens. You act again, nothing happens again. Over time, the mind stops waiting for consequences at all. The absence of punishment becomes evidence. Evidence that the system works. Evidence that you understand it. Evidence that you are somehow outside of it. Anonymity does something subtle to identity. It does not erase who you are. It divides you. There is the person who wakes up, goes to work, interacts with the world. And there is the person behind the screen. The second feels distant, less real, less accountable. At first, the boundary is clear. Then it softens. And slowly, the line between the two begins to blur. Butler did not wake up one morning believing he was immune to consequence. He grew into that belief. Through comfort, through familiarity, through the quiet reassurance of time passing without repercussion. This is how people begin to confuse invisibility with invincibility. They are not the same. Invisibility is temporary. Invincibility is imagined. But the human mind prefers the illusion, because it is easier to believe you are protected than to accept that you are simply unnoticed. And unnoticed does not mean unseen forever. It only means not yet. This illusion is not unique to hackers. It appears wherever actions are separated from immediate human response. Behind screens, behind systems, behind distance. And once a person accepts that illusion, every decision after it becomes easier, less heavy, less personal, less human, until the weight returns. And when it does not arrive gradually. It arrives all at once. What grew around Max Butler did not feel like chaos. It felt organized. From the outside, it would later be described as an empire. But from the inside, it felt practical, structured, routine. Behind the screens, this was no longer a single individual acting alone. It was a system, a collection of spaces people returned to every day. Forums became meeting rooms. Markets became habits. Messages became schedules. And Butler was no longer just present. He was central. He did not issue commands loudly. He coordinated quietly, connected people, resolved conflicts before they escalated. That is how management often works, not through force, but through reliability. And reliability builds trust. People depended on systems he helped stabilize. They relied on processes that felt predictable, consistent, safe. That sense of order changed the psychology of everyone involved. Because order removes doubt. And doubt is often the final barrier between participation and escalation. This was not about excitement. It was about control. Control over timing. Control over access. Control over flow. And with control comes responsibility, but also entitlement. Over time, Butler did not see himself as contributing to harm. He saw himself as someone keeping things functioning. That belief is powerful. When people believe they are maintaining order, they begin to excuse impact. They justify distance. They replace consequence with function. The system grew. Communities expanded. More people passed through. And growth brought routine. Logging in at the same hours. Responding within familiar windows of time. Solving the same problems in the same ways. Routines do not feel dangerous. They feel efficient. But efficiency leaves traces. Not technical ones, human ones. Patterns of presence. Patterns of attention. Patterns of availability. The very habits that made the system feel stable were quietly shaping a profile. A profile of behavior. Butler did not notice this transformation, because nothing felt different. That is how scale hides its cost. When responsibility is distributed across systems, individuals feel lighter, less visible, less accountable. And the larger the structure becomes, the easier it is to believe no single person can be held. This is where the empire truly forms. Not when numbers rise, not when influence expands, but when habits settle, when repetition feels normal, when familiarity replaces caution. The system did not make Butler invisible. It made him predictable. And predictability is never protection. It is exposure, waiting to be recognized. At the height of control, nothing appeared unstable. Nothing felt threatened. That is often the moment just before collapse. Because what feels strongest from the inside often appears most legible from the outside. And by then, the map was already being drawn. Quietly, popular culture teaches us the wrong lesson about investigations. It suggests that cases like this are solved through brilliance, through sudden insight, through one perfect move that changes everything. That is not how reality works. Most investigations do not begin with action. They begin with patience. They do not chase intelligence. They observe behavior. Because technology evolves quickly, people do not. Investigators are not looking for genius. They are looking for repetition. The same hours, the same pauses, the same moments of presence. Human beings leave patterns long before they leave evidence. Online activity does not exist on its own. It lives inside a human life. People wake up, they go to work, they rest, they sleep, and slowly, without intention, those rhythms begin to appear on the screen. Logins occur at familiar times. Responses follow predictable delays. Silence arrives when real life intervenes. None of this feels significant on its own, but together it becomes a shape. This is forensic reality. Not breaking systems, not forcing access. Just watching how a person moves through time. Max Butler did not see this forming, because from his perspective, nothing had changed. He was doing what he had always done. At the times he had always done it, in ways that felt natural, and that is where the danger lies. People believe anonymity protects actions, but actions still belong to bodies, to schedules, to habits. The internet does not erase the human clock. It reflects it. Investigators do not need to know who someone is immediately. They need to know when that person appears, when they disappear, when they return. Over time, online behavior begins to align with the offline world. Weekdays look different from weekends. Late nights tell their own story. Absences reveal priorities. This is not surveillance in the dramatic sense. It is interpretation, reading the quiet signals people do not realize they are sending. For Butler, the system felt stable, invisible, protected. But stability creates consistency, and consistency creates identity, not a name, not an address, a rhythm. And once a rhythm is understood, distance collapses. Investigators do not need to rush. They wait. They allow the pattern to confirm itself, again and again, until the presence behind the activity becomes undeniable. This is the moment anonymity begins to fail. Not suddenly, not loudly, but inevitably. Because no one can live two separate lives forever without allowing them to overlap. At some point, the screen begins to reflect the person behind it. And once that reflection becomes clear, everything else follows. Quietly, methodically. Human behavior does not lie. It only repeats itself until someone finally notices. The mistake was not clever. It was not sophisticated. It did not arrive as a dramatic failure. It arrived quietly. Nothing significant changed in Max Butler's life. That was the problem. While systems evolved around him, while investigations learned to slow down, adapt and wait, he remained the same. The same hours, the same routines, the same confidence. Human beings trust what feels familiar. Familiarity creates comfort, and comfort convinces people they do not need to change. But the world does not pause for familiarity. The danger was not in what Butler did. It was in what he stopped doing. He stopped questioning himself, stopped imagining consequence, stopped feeling the weight of time passing. When nothing goes wrong for long enough, people stop expecting anything to go wrong at all. This is how caution erodes. Risk becomes background noise. Something theoretical. Something that happens to other people. Butler believed he had already proven himself. Proven that he understood the rules. Proven that he was careful. And past success can be misleading. It teaches people to mistake repetition for skill, when sometimes it is simply luck that has not expired yet. He did not notice the pressure tightening around him, because pressure does not announce itself. It looks like ordinary days, ordinary actions, ordinary decisions. Investigators did not need a dramatic mistake. They needed consistency. They needed him to remain predictable. And he did. Predictability feels efficient. It feels controlled. It feels safe. But predictability is also exposure. While Butler trusted the past, others were learning from it. They learned how long people hold onto habits, how rarely schedules change, how confidence often prevents adaptation. This is the quiet truth behind most failures. They are not caused by bold mistakes. They are caused by stillness, by the belief that yesterday's protection will still work tomorrow, by the assumption that because something has not happened yet, it never will. The human error here was not greed, not arrogance in its obvious form. It was trust in permanence. Trust that life could remain stable inside a world built to change. And when that trust finally broke, it did not collapse loudly. It slipped, one routine at a time, one habit at a time, until the distance between who Butler believed he was and how visible he had become could no longer be ignored. That is how most people fall, not by moving too fast, but by standing still while the ground shifts beneath them. When the arrest finally happened, it did not feel like a climax. There were no alarms, no dramatic countdown, no final message sent into the void. It felt ordinary. And that was what made it devastating. Reality does not arrive with music. It does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, in small rooms, at unexpected moments. For Max Butler, this moment was not cinematic. It was human. A knock at the door, a question, a presence that could no longer be ignored. The distance he had trusted collapsed instantly. Years of believing he was untouchable ended without resistance, without spectacle, without performance, because myths do not survive contact with reality. There was no digital duel, no test of intelligence, no final proof of superiority, just confirmation. Patterns aligned. Behavior made sense. What once felt invisible became reachable. In that moment, Butler was no longer an identity online. He was a person standing in front of other people. And that shift is unbearable for anyone who has lived behind distance. Screens remove faces. Arrests restore them. Suddenly, time felt different, slower, heavier. Everything that once felt abstract became immediate. Responsibility, scale, impact. The fantasy of control dissolved. What remained was a human being facing the weight of his own repetition. This is the part most stories exaggerate. They search for drama where none exists, because the truth is quieter. The arrest did not transform who Butler was. It revealed it. It revealed how far confidence can carry someone before it leaves them exposed. In that moment, there was no victory, no defeat, only the end of pretending. The belief that he could exist beyond reach was replaced by a simple realization. He had always been part of the same world as everyone else. The same rules, the same limits. The internet had not protected him. It had only delayed this meeting, and when reality finally arrived, it did not rush. It waited. That is how most illusions end. Not with noise, not with chaos, but with silence. The courtroom did not care about reputation. It did not care how intelligent someone believed they were. It did not care how complex the systems once felt. Courts speak a different language. They speak in behavior. Inside this room, code lost its power. Screens disappeared. Usernames meant nothing. What remained was time. Years of repetition. Consistent presence. Choices made again and again. This is where the myth finally collapsed, not because technology was explained more clearly, but because patterns told a simpler story, one the court understood. The prosecution did not need to prove brilliance. They needed to show continuity. The same habits, the same roles, the same responsibilities carried quietly over long periods of time. That is how accountability is built. Not from a single moment, but from many ordinary ones stacked together. In the courtroom, Butler was not presented as a mastermind. He was presented as someone who never stepped away. Someone who stayed, who managed, who returned. That distinction mattered, Because courts do not punish ideas. They punish actions. They do not debate intelligence. They measure impact. And impact lives in scale, the number of people affected, the length of time harm continued, the consistency of involvement. No technical explanation could undo that. Behavior does not argue back. It does not reinterpret itself. It does not disappear under complexity. It simply exists. This is often the hardest moment for people like Butler, because confidence once lived in complexity, in the belief that understanding systems meant being beyond judgment. But judgment does not require understanding everything. It requires understanding enough to see intent, enough to see persistence, enough to see choice. Inside that room, the distance Butler relied on was gone. Every action was pulled closer, made human, made concrete. This is where many illusions end, not when someone is arrested, but when they are understood. Because once behavior is seen clearly, there is nowhere left to hide behind explanation. The courtroom did not ask who he believed he was. It asked what he did. And the answer did not change. It did not need to be. By the time it arrived, the story was already clear. This was not about a single moment, not about one mistake, not about one decision made under pressure. It was about time, years of repetition, years of presence, years of choices made without pause or reflection. The court did not punish knowledge. It punished persistence. That distinction matters, because society does not fear intelligence. It fears indifference to consequence. The sentence reflected scale, how long the behavior continued, how many lives were affected, how deeply systems were used without restraint. This was not a symbolic verdict. It was a practical one, a reminder that harm does not need to be loud to be real. For Max Butler, the punishment was not only the loss of freedom, it was the loss of narrative. The story he had told himself collapsed. He was no longer careful, no longer separate, no longer beyond reach. He was accountable. And accountability is uncomfortable, because it removes interpretation. It replaces belief with record, confidence with consequence. But this story does not end with one person. Every era produces its own version of this illusion. The belief that distance equals safety, that systems can absorb harm without naming it, that if no one reacts immediately, nothing matters. The sentence challenged that belief. It reminded society of something older than technology. Actions accumulate. Habits reveal intention. Time makes patterns impossible to ignore. This is the social meaning behind the verdict. Not that the internet is dangerous, but that people carry themselves into it. The same psychology, the same comforts, the same blind spots. And when society responds, it does not respond to code. It responds to conduct. The sentence closed a chapter, but it left a question open. How many others still believe they are unseen, still delayed, still protected by silence? Because silence is not forgiveness. It is time, and time always runs out. Max Butler did not fall because technology failed him. Technology did exactly what it was designed to do. It amplified what was already there. What failed was something older, something human. The belief that control can exist without consequence. That power can grow without weight. That distance can erase responsibility. This story is not really about hacking. It never was. It is about what happens when people stop feeling watched, when feedback disappears, when time stretches long enough for confidence to harden into certainty. Power rarely announces itself as power. It arrives quietly, as familiarity, as comfort, as the absence of resistance. And when nothing pushes back, people begin to believe they are right, then necessary, then untouchable. That progression is not unique to one man or to one era. It appears wherever systems grow faster than reflection, where efficiency replaces pause, where success is measured without asking who absorbs the cost. The internet did not create this pattern. It revealed it. Because behind every screen lives the same human psychology, the same desire to feel above limits, the same temptation to believe rules are meant for others. Max Butler believed he could remain unchanged while the world adapted around him. That belief is common. It is comforting. And it is almost always wrong. The most dangerous moment is not when someone hides. It is when they stop questioning themselves. when confidence replaces humility, when habit replaces awareness, when power no longer feels borrowed. This is the question the story leaves behind. Not how systems fail, but how people change when they believe they cannot be reached. And whether any of us, given enough distance and enough time, would recognize the moment we cross that line. Because the line is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, reasonable, until it is not. And by then, the story is already written. The only question left is who recognizes it in time. The greatest lesson about education in this case does not come from technology. And it does not come from crime. It comes from how people are taught to understand power, distance, and responsibility. We live in a time where knowledge moves faster than ever, but inner maturity develops slowly. People are taught how to use systems, how to optimize tools, how to move faster, smarter, and more efficiently than others. But they are rarely taught when to stop. Very few are taught that every new skill does not only create ability, it carries an invisible share of responsibility. Modern education often asks one question, what can you do? And avoids the harder one, who does this affect? When consequences are not immediate, people begin to believe they do not exist. And when that belief repeats long enough, it becomes a dangerous mindset. A mindset where ethics feel optional and limits feel like rules meant for someone else. This case reveals a deep gap in education around self-awareness. No one is born believing they stand above a system. People grow into that belief when they are not challenged, not reflected, not reminded that power is always borrowed, never owned. True education is not only about delivering knowledge. It must teach the ability to question oneself, especially when everything seems to be working. A healthy society is not one without talented people. It is one where talented people understand their limits. That can only happen when education places the human being at the center, not performance, not efficiency, not results. It must teach that silence from a system is not approval. That not being caught is never the same as being right. And finally, education must prepare people for an uncomfortable truth. That no distance is far enough to erase responsibility. No screen is thick enough to hide conscience. And no power survives without self-restraint. If education can do that, stories like this will not arrive as final warnings, but as signals heard in time.